welcome to, well, what in my eyes is a monumental moment. We are sat in the successor to the McLaren 675 LT. I'm not sure how many of you watching this right now tuned into my channel about 2 years ago, but I was the very lucky owner of a McLaren 675 LT. I spent 10,000 miles in that car, and it was, without exception, to this date, one of the best cars I've ever driven. And the notion that they were going to take the 720S platform and turn it up to 11 to exceed the ability of that already incredible car blew my mind. And now here we are, I'm sat in it. Welcome to the McLaren 765 LT. 765, the amount of horsepower or PS that it has. It's now running 800 Newton meters of torque. If that number sounds familiar, it's because the McLaren Senna just so happens to be running the same amount of torque, which is mind-boggling. Still maintaining that incredible turbocharged flat plane crank V8. As the LT brand would suggest by now, we've had 675 LT, it was then quickly followed by the 600 LT, and now the next addition in the Super Series of cars is this, the 765 LT. And LT basically means that McLaren have sprinkled the magic dust on the car, making for less weight and more power. That simple formula is music to any petrolhead's ears. This car is now weighing 80 kilograms less than a McLaren 720S. Now, in the world of shedding weight, most car manufacturers tend to aim for around about the 90 to 100 kilogram mark. Now, most manufacturers are able to achieve that simply because there's already quite a bit of weight in their cars, so it's easier for them to find weight to shave. In the case of the 720S, the car was already incredibly lightweight. Don't forget that this is built entirely around a carbon tub. I'm sure you can see from the inside here, a lot of that carbon tub is exposed on the A columns here. And if I reach back, you can see it all from the monocage tube as well, which this platform is built on. But the 720S was already so light that finding 80 kilograms, while on paper might not seem such a big deal, when it comes to the 720S is actually remarkable. Speaking with McLaren, I asked, why weren't you able to find 100? Not that I wasn't happy with 80. They just said, look, in order to achieve that, it would have been so expensive and taken such a long time that it just wouldn't have stacked up for where this car sits price-wise. Now, as it happens today, I'm sat in this car quite far in advance of the Geneva Motor Show when this car will be launched, so I don't have an official price right now. But don't forget that this is a Super Series car. So in the McLaren lineup, we've got Sport Series, which is 570S and 600 LT. We've got Super Series, which is 720S, and we have the Ultimate Series, things like McLaren P1, Senna, Elva, things like that. So Super Series cars will sit in price bracket below Senna. So it's going to be a chunk of change, but I don't think it's going to be crazy in terms of where McLaren have stretched prices. Back to the car. Yes, as I mentioned, the ethos of it is more power, less weight. So the car, wet weight, which means all fluids and full tank of fuel, is coming in at 1,339 kilograms. Now, combined with 765 horsepower, that gives it its highest power to weight ratio in its class. It's bonkers stuff. Now, to set some context around that, this is a rear-wheel drive car which will go from 0 to 60 in 2.8 seconds. Just get your mind around that. I mean, look, in this day of crazy performance figures, there are other cars out there which will achieve that, but not with rear-wheel drive alone. That is some woking witchcraft magicry to try and apply that sort of traction and that much torque. 800 Newton meters of torque from standstill to 60, 2.8 seconds. I don't know how they do it. Like, every time I step into a new McLaren, there's always this sort of groundbreaking figure which sort of takes my brain a little bit of time to process before I'm like, yeah, we're sort of rewriting the physics rulebook here. It will then propel itself onwards to 125 miles an hour in around about 7.5 seconds. 125 miles an hour in 7.5 seconds. I remember when a decent hot hatch wouldn't do that to 60. It's otherworldly stuff. And then, of course, this car is now all about increased aero. So if we take a look at the external of the car. Let's begin with the rear, or the rear three quarters. I've only spent a few minutes in front of this thing, but already I'm thinking this is my favourite view. So dramatic change from standard 720. Massive emphasis on cooling. So what is unique to the 765 LT is all of these cooling vanes and cooling vents here, but the details when you get up close are fascinating. Massive carbon diffuser. The wing, I'm not sure if this is coming through on camera, this is a 20% larger wing than standard 720S. And there's actually this sort of recess here, this slight chop out, because when it acts as an air brake and it comes up in full force, if it wasn't for this chop out here, you actually wouldn't be able to see through the back window because it's such a massive wing. Speaking of back window, there is this sort of subtle double bubble vibe happening here. Now, as part of the weight saving, not only has the glass in the front been made thinner, but the glass towards the rear isn't glass, it's a sort of plexiglass, all in favor of saving weight. And then on top, the cooling continues by a complete open cave here of mesh that you can see right through into the engine, and these massive quad exhaust pipes. Now, sadly, we're not having an opportunity today to actually drive it, but from the footage I've seen, these are spitting flames out to about here, so it's going to be drama through and through. And this is the first time that McLaren have applied a fully titanium exhaust system to a Super Series car, so very cool stuff indeed. This whole rear here is all to do with extracting hot air. That's basically why it looks like the poshest cheese grater you've ever seen. But as a result of that, this big gap here between the diffuser and bumper, you can actually see the rear subframe of the car and then the gearbox housed in it. It's so open, and it's not until you sort of get up close to it that you can appreciate the amount of sculpture this car's got. I mean, check out that. For example, this area here is just purely to do with controlling airflow, relieving pressure in the back archwell. Yeah, everything is all about form, but it just so happens to look fantastic. Massive part of the LT magic dust is, of course, the revised aero. So if you look down the side of the car, starting from these carbon end plates, it's all about keeping the air close to the car and channeling it down the body. It ties in with these new 10-spoke lightweight wheels, which are conveniently fastened to the car with titanium wheel bolts. And then as we work our way down, you can see that all of the extra aero paneling, which stands out as additional to a standard 720S, is all in carbon fiber. These subtle air vents. Now, this is actually a design feature which is filtered down from 675 LT, more recently 600 LT. The idea is that at much higher speeds, because the car is capable of doing over 200 miles an hour, that this will relieve the pressure from the well. Really important on this car, because the majority of the downforce that they've managed to achieve is by pitching the nose down an extra 5 mil. That's contributed to a massive amount of extra downforce. So at higher speeds, to be able to relieve pressure from here will make sure that that extra 5 mil keeps the nose pressed down in the road. And then while we're here, check out these colossal discs. So these are the sort of standard 720S discs, but the calipers are actually off the Senna. Now, there is the option, if you want to go full chat and spec the full front brake system from the Senna. Having experienced that car myself, I can tell you the braking experience from that is otherworldly. And then around the front, contributing to that extra downforce and airflow, is a revised and very aggressive carbon splitter, all about channeling air and pushing it down underneath the floor pan of this car, which is now completely bespoke to 765 LT. So if we look back historically at what the formula was to make an LT car more exciting, stiffening up the engine mounts so you would get more vibration through this incredible carbon tub, and it literally resonates from the engine through the tub up through these carbon seats and shakes your internal organs somewhat, or just a little bit more than the standard car would. All of these things add up to a greater sense of occasion, a greater sense of connection with the drive. And speaking of drive and speaking of connection, we got to talk about this gearbox. Now, in McLaren since day one, from the 12C onwards, the gearboxes have always been lightning fast twin clutch boxes, ultra responsive and just a dream to live with, even in automatic mode. But in LT cars, they take things a step further. Now, in 765 LT, the gearing has been shortened by around about 15%, which ultimately means that you're going to be smashing through these gears a lot faster. That also makes it a lot more engaging drive. The gearbox software, the gearbox tech, and shift patterns and shift speeds have also filtered down from Senna. So we've got Senna-inspired brakes, Senna-inspired shifting. Listen, if you spent some time watching Senna content or even had the luck of experiencing a Senna for yourself, the gearbox is a masterful wonderpiece of engineering. It's so engaging, so lightning fast, but when you're pulling up and down, there's this incredible feeling of interaction between you, the engine, and drivetrain that sort of initiates these, what has actually now become an LT signature feature, which is these whip cracks on both the up and down shifts. If you time it right, looking back to my time in the 675 LT, if you timed your shifts right on the up or down shifts, it was like someone had thrown a grenade out behind you, because there was these sort of small explosions, often literally some fire, and these whip cracks, which just added to the theatrical experience of engaging with this wonderful drivetrain. And in this, they've taken that to the next degree, filtered down learnings from Senna, put it into a Super Series car. It's just going to set you alight. And speaking of setting us alight, it also still shoots flames. Interior, not massively revised really. Obviously you would expect, it's almost a given that it would be completely clad in Alcantara and lots of carbon fiber. One of the more notable changes is the central tunnel here. This shrouding, cup holders that grace the central transmission tunnel is now one single piece of carbon fiber, and there is also the option here to remove the armrest, which doubles as a lid in this standard 720S. What McLaren have done in the LT, embracing the fact that this isn't necessarily designed as the most practical or daily driver of supercars, they've really embraced the fact that this is all about theatre and drama, and there's this little porthole in the back. It's absolutely beautiful. It opens up that space with this wonderful window shrouded in carbon fiber, and you can see the engine working behind you. It's a beautiful, it's actually artwork. It's stunning. It's literally like putting your engine on show in a sort of frame. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous feature. All I want to do now is get behind the wheel and truly convey what this thing is like. It's so, so exciting. So yeah, let's hopefully bring you some dates as to when the first drive of this car will be. That is what I am certainly the most excited about. As always, please leave your questions and comments below. I'll try and get any further insight and information to you during the Geneva Motor Show. Thank you so much for watching, and I shall see you next time. Ciao.